Hello and welcome to August 1st Friday, our Society pub session. I'm Richard Gosling. I'm going to be your landlord tonight, and I'm joined this evening with my glamorous co-host, beautifully decked out tonight, Dr. Andy Forrester, our spirits educator, who's looking the part for our kind of science fiction themed evening, futuristic, all things whiskey knowledge, whiskey geekery, dare I say. So Andy's with us. How are you doing tonight, Andy?
Good evening, Richard. Nice to see you. Yeah, I thought I'd get into the spirit of things, and it helps when you've got a 7-year-old and you can borrow their toys.
I thought they were your toys. Come on.
Well, look, I had one of those back in the 80s.
Very good. Back to the future then.
Yes.
Well, let me tell everyone what we've got coming up tonight. I hope you've all got a nice dram in your hand. This month's theme for August is all about innovation, the future, a bit of science fiction, whiskey knowledge, whiskey geekery. So with all that in mind, we've lined up a really good evening for you. We've got music from a guy called Dolphin Boy, who takes like traditional beats, traditional music, and puts innovative beats on them. Really, really good. We're going to check in with our ambassador Freddie in China to see what's going on in that part of the world, that we might be catching up with them in a couple of years' time. We've got Dr. Morgan Gay, who is a food and drink futurologist. She looks into the future, and she's going to be joining us to talk about trends that she sees, looking at what lockdown has done in terms of how we're enjoying food and drink. So that's going to be really interesting. And we're going to have Roy Duff, whiskey evangelist from Aquavitae, who was a kind of early adopter of online technology to share whiskey with a virtual community. So we're going to be joined by Roy, find out how he got into it and what he thinks the future holds in terms of bringing people together online to share whiskey and enjoy whiskey. We've got all that. We want you to get involved as always. We want you to give us a shout out. Where are you? What are you drinking? How are you doing? And of course, we've got any questions for Dr. Andy. He's in the pub tonight to take any whiskey questions you've got, and we'll be coming back to him for a special segment on that very soon, right? So let us know where you are, what you're doing, what you're drinking. But we're going to kick off with music from DJ Dolphin Boy. This is a guy called Andy Levy. He's a brilliant DJ. He was meant to be with us in person, but he's just moved up to the Isle of Egg, and he's getting his technology sorted out, and he couldn't quite get it sorted in time for this evening's pub session, unfortunately. But we've managed to get a couple of tracks from him that he's done specially for us, and we've laid down some video on those tracks. So we're just going to kick things off. Fill your glasses. We've got 5 minutes of Dolphin Boy coming up, so let's just kick off with him. Here we go.
Whisky, Uscaba. In Gaelic, they call it the water of life. And to a true islander, life without it is not worth living.
Hey a banjo?
No, sir.
Good.
Bagpipes. Bagpipes. That's right, I said bagpipes. 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 I'm a piper.
What about that?
I just pop in a wee message there to everyone. I just thought that was awesome.
He's absolutely brilliant. That's Andy Levy. He goes by DJ Dolphin Boy. He was Edinburgh based, but he's just moved up to Egg. And as I said, he was struggling to get his technology sorted. So he should have been doing that live. He was totally up for it. And he sends his apologies that he just couldn't get the technology sorted out in time for tonight. But thankfully, we had our social media guru, Mads, on hand, and she was able to take the tracks and lay in some kind of futuristic video so that we could still enjoy the music. Brilliant way to kick things off. So thank you to DJ Dolphin Boy, and thank you to Mads for sorting out the video. Really brilliant. So that was a nice way to kick things off. Something a wee bit different, I think you'll agree.
Yeah, it was great. No, it was a real contrast with some of the nice kind of Delta blues we've had and some more folky stuff. I've got a helper, by the way.
Shout out to Hector there in the background.
Give him a wave.
Maybe a wee bit.
Thanks to Hector for lending me all the retro toys. I think you told me earlier, Richard, you only asked Mads this morning to put that video stuff together. So good on Mads.
Yeah, good on Mads.
Not just a social media guru.
Exactly. No, brilliant. So let's drink some whiskey, Andy. We've got a brilliant outturn which came out this morning. And, you know, as always, a brilliant selection of drams. And, you know, I think part of the theme this month is like looking at the future, but it's about whiskey knowledge as well. And it's about how more of an understanding of what goes into your glass helps you appreciate the whiskey. And we've got a good example, I think, tonight with, we're going to have a wee dram of this 10.196, right? You've got some there. I've got some here. This is called Smoky Harbour Fish Supper. 10.196. Get it in front of the camera. There we are. So Smoky Harbour Fish Supper. And it's a sensational dram. I mean, what really hits me on the nose is I'm getting, like, you know, these tins of sardines that you used to get when you were younger, and they're in the tomato sauce. So you've got that fishiness, but a kind of sweet tomato sauce. So it's full of that. But I think what makes this dram special and different is that it was matured in a heavily toasted second fill French oak barrique, right?
Okay.
So it's taken on obviously some of that character, and there's that heat treatment in the wood, which has had an influence in the maturation. So that's your cue, Andy, to tell us all about heat treatment and its influence in maturation.
Yeah, happily. Can I first say I think we've put this into our tasting panel, Richard, and I know we have a little bit of insight there. I've put this into our peated flavoured category, but I was just having a little sniff now, and I think it could just have easily ended up in oily and coastal with that kind of fishy, sardiny, salty tanginess. So sometimes we have a little bit of, should we say, debate around exactly where these whiskies are going to end up flavour profile. Sometimes it's absolutely clear, and other times it's all up for a bit of chat. So, but anyway, a peated whiskey, but with lots of lovely kind of coastal stuff. So, sorry, what was the question, Richard? You were asking me about.
The question was about the heat treatment of the French oak and what that has done in terms of flavour and what.
Okay, so right, so a couple of important things to discuss. Firstly, French oak, so European oak, which will naturally deliver if effectively heat treated, will deliver quite a different character to our old friend the bourbon cask, which we were celebrating last month, I think, if you remember, Richard. The European oak will give more colour to the whiskey typically than American oak, but less of the sort of coconutty vanilla flavours, more of the tannic, spicy, nutty, fruity flavours. But as I alluded to there, my little helper just pop down a little bit? Thank you. The heat treatment's absolutely critical in generating the colour and the flavour in the wood. If you don't do that successfully, you won't get either. And that's because the heat, as it penetrates the wood, breaks down the structural molecules that make up the wood, principally lignin. Now, lignin's a complex molecule, and when it breaks down during that thermal degradation, it produces all sorts of different compounds, some of which are flavor active. And we think of things like eugenol, which has a sort of a spicy, smoky character to it, guaiacol, very similar, but also things like vanillin, which will produce sweet flavors. So that's from the toasting of the wood. A little bit of a contrast here to what we get from charring. There'll have probably been a lot of chat last month about the charring of American oak casks. The charring is much more intense heat treatment designed to burn the wood, create a charcoal layer inside the cask, which will remove immature, sulfury, young spirit aromas and character from the wood that we're not looking for. The toasting, by contrast, is there to generate the flavour, generate the colour, the sweetness, the spiciness, the flavours we do want in the whiskey.
Well, you're certainly getting the spice there on the nose. I think for me, this benefits from just a wee splash of water, just to dampen down the spiciness a little bit.
Yeah. In the spirit of the science theme, my helper is introducing water with a scientist pipette. Right, thank you. I think you should go sit down.
Good job.
Yeah, so yeah, does it? It opens up. Did you say it was bringing more of the sweetness, Richard?
Yeah, well, I didn't say that, but
okay.
I would agree with that. I think it kind of dampens down the spice just a little bit, and yeah, opens up a little bit more of that sweetness and more of that kind of the kind of sweet tomato sauce that I'm getting from the sardine can that I seem to be fixated on at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lovely savoury quality to this whiskey as well, which often we would see from spirits that have a little bit of a sulfury character there, which can create this kind of nice meaty bovril. I think if you look at the tasting notes, the panel described Worcestershire sauce, and I guess in that you've got both savoury flavours, but also interestingly anchovies are part of Worcestershire sauce, and you're talking about your sardines. Yeah. So wonder if there's something in that there.
Plays in. Well, it's a cracking dram. Andy, you're we're going to start running an unfiltered column called Ask Dr. Andy, and it's basically for members who want to ask any questions about whiskey, about what the society does, about how to understand their whiskey a bit more in any shape or form. you're there to tackle any questions. So we're inviting members to get in touch, ask Dr. Andy at smws.com. We've got a question in already,
okay,
which I think we're going to tackle tonight. And this is from Thomas. He was asking about what knowledge do we have in the whiskey world about predicting the characteristics of cask aging on bottles where whiskey has been matured in different climates. And his example was in Goa, obviously a subtropical climate where whiskey is subject to a totally different form of maturation than in Speyside. And so what understanding do we have in the whiskey world about the impact of climate on maturation? Is it a question of 5 years in Goa equals 15 years on Speyside? Or, what can you tell us about that?
Have I got all night?
You've got 5 minutes tops.
Okay. So I think, what I'm going to do for this one, Richard, and everyone, and please do, ping other questions as I'm chatting right now, and happy to answer them all, everyone. But what I'm going to do, I think, here is draw on some of the knowledge I've got from some of the research that happened whilst I was at the Scotch Whisky Research Institute. Some of our members will know that we're members of the Industries Research and Technology Organisation. And what a major project that was carried out over about a period of about 4 years, a few years back, was called the Matin Project, where essentially what we set out to do was look at how the warehouse environment impacts maturation. And but with reference to both the impact on losses, how much a cask loses, the angel share, but also with looking at how the warehouse environment, temperature and humidity impacted what we call as scientists mature quality or flavour to everyone else. And by collecting huge amounts of data, temperature and humidity data from warehouses all across Scotland, different types of warehouses, modern tin sheds as we call them, but also old traditional dunnage warehouses, we were able to create a model which essentially predicts the effect of temperature on both losses and also what happens during immature quality. This was also supported, I should add, by laboratory experiments where we matured casks, real life-size casks of maturing malt whiskey, but also used model systems like mini casks, and we were able to mature that whiskey under very controlled conditions where we were able to ramp up or cool down the temperature accordingly. So lots of data which essentially gave us clues as to what the relationship between principally temperature, but also humidity and what happens during maturation. And look, there's no great surprise really. Doesn't take somebody in a white coat for this one, but the higher the temperature, the more rapid the maturation. And certainly what we saw in our sort of in vitro laboratory experiments is the higher the temperature, the more rapid the extraction of flavour and colour from the wood. So those compounds that have been generated during that heat treatment we were just chatting about with the French oak barrique there, Richard. So certainly it speeds up the extraction of flavour and colour. What we also saw, interestingly, is an increase in the removal of the immature character by the char. And also, it doesn't, again, this is high school chemistry. The higher the temperature, the faster reaction. So some of those longer term reactions that occur, some of those longer term reactions that occur during maturation, the sort of what I call redox reactions, the oxidation, they also proceed a little bit more rapidly. However, I think the main thing that you see is much more efficient, much more rapid extraction of sweetness and spiciness from the wood. And that potentially gives and I think this is important here, the cask influence maybe in 5 years that you might see in 15 years in Scotland, but not necessarily an equivalent increase in the rate of some of those other maturation reactions. Certainly they speed up, but so it's not an entirely an acceleration of the overall maturation process. Does that make sense, Richard? Because I'm kind of gone into kind of geeky science speak. And
listen, I get thrown out of my science class in my second year of school. I've got no idea basically what you're talking about, but I do know I've tried what I do know is I've tried whiskies from Goa and I've tried whiskies from Taiwan. And you know, you bottle these whiskies after 3, 4, 5 years is kind of long-term maturation for these whiskies. And I think any members who've had a chance to try some of our bottlings from these places will agree they're absolutely sensational at very, very what we would call young ages. So I don't understand any of that, but I do understand that the whiskey tastes fantastic. So thank you for your scientific explanation. I'm afraid most of it went over my head, but you know, it's
the bottom
good.
line is more influence of the cask quicker.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff.
We've got some sci-fi effects now.
Yeah, even better. So questions for Dr. Andy, you can put them in the comments, or as I said, you can email askdrandy@smws.com. Right. We're going to move on. We have our food futurologist, Morgan Gay, waiting in the wings. But first of all, we're going to cross over to Shanghai, China, where I asked our ambassador there, Freddie Xiang, to give us a kind of idea of what trends he is seeing in China that, you know, we might be seeing here in a few years' time. China, obviously, a big embracer of technology, probably way ahead of us in terms of how they're using technology and developing flavors and doing interesting things. So I've got a short video from Freddie, which I'll play now, and then we'll catch up with Dr. Morgan Gay. So here's Freddie.
Hi, this is Freddie, Scotch Malt Whisky Society Ambassador in China, Shanghai. It's great to join your pub session in Scotland and see so many members join your first Friday virtual pub session. I know you are talking about technology and the future tonight, and people now often look toward China as a futuristic country. But what does that mean in terms of our whiskey world? Well, let me tell you something interesting here. Starbucks China recently launched a series of whiskey casks coffee. They put Guatemala coffee beans into whiskey casks. They claimed that the progress of the cask selecting, beans filling, finishing, and roasting, all well done in Seattle, USA. Made the way all across the Pacific Ocean to China, over 9,000 kilometers. The 6 new launch takes the foundation of cold brew boosts with coffee beans flavors as well as the aroma of whiskey. It's quite an innovative experience. The whiskey flavored coffee plus authentic whiskey makes a coffee cocktail with unique flavor. Both whiskey and coffee are in the pool of the Chinese young generation, so a lot of bars followed at that time. Every professional cocktail bar or whiskey bars in China now has 1 or 2 of such cocktails. I think this is also a crossover combination of whiskey. Do you love it?
All right, that's Freddie. So maybe it wasn't entirely clear, but Freddie's talking about how in China, Starbucks has taken coffee beans that have been aged in whiskey barrels. So they've got the coffee beans have a whiskey influence, but now coffee is becoming an integral part of whiskey cocktails. And you know, younger drinkers are embracing those kind of flavors. But let me bring in Dr. Morgan Gay. She's a friend of the society, and she worked on a campaign that we did in 2017, I think, Morgan, where you were a flavor fanatic, and we explored flavors and future trends at that time. That was 3 years ago now. So obviously a lot has changed in the meantime.
Yeah, that was the whole other era.
We spoke earlier, and you were basically saying that, okay, we've reached 2020, and this is like a fundamental shift for us in terms of how we live our lives, but in terms of food and drink. So where are we? What's going to happen?
Well, we're in an unprecedented time, and we've never been in this, not just our generation, but our previous generations for hundreds of years, because we've been living in a time of having, and we're moving into this 2020 is about knowing. So as we go into the future for the next hundreds of years, we're changing our way as humanity into knowing. So what that means for flavor, for whiskey, what it means this year, next year, is that things will never be the same again. And so one of the things that we're really keen on now is humanity. We're starting to think that actually people matter. And you realize that after lockdown, during lockdown, the things that we miss the most, it's not stuff, it's people. And so we're moving into this, we really want to belong. I mean, whiskey will really play well into this space, because the whole story, it's not just, as you know, it's not just about the flavor, but it's the story about what it is you're drinking, who you're drinking it with, and the experience of that. So it's about belonging. There's a big play into nostalgia, again, especially as we're going into recession. We always like to look back when things are tough. So there's a big thing around nostalgia stories. But belonging and comfort, we're really looking for comfort and joy. There's something about that, because I feel like we're in this time of hardship and it's been difficult. So 2020 is destined to be tough. 2021 also not looking too great. And so when I was talking about this a couple of years ago, saying, unprecedented times in 2020 that we're going to look back and never recognize our lives in 2019. And it's because right out of the gate in 2020, we had the fires in Australia, and it just has been one thing after another. I mean, we're looking at what's happening in Lebanon. It's just going to be cataclysmic, disaster after disaster, COVID being one of those things that are affecting the world. So we're wanting soothing, we're wanting pause, we're wanting some kind of stillness and unity and texture and comfort, something that's going to bring us together and bring interest into the everyday. We're going to start heightening these rituals of the everyday and everyday experiences. So the flavors that are coming up, or we're going to be interested in, there's a big play into fungi, fungus, mushrooms, everything in that space, and big conversations around everything to do with mushroom protein, mushrooms in textures and building materials, in packaging materials, in everything like that. Looking at possibilities of creating flavor from waste materials will be a big thing. So offcuts of food, imperfect foods, things like that. Packaging will be also key. So we might start to see some whiskey bottles in different types of packaging, or even maybe textured bottles coming into play. Florals, because everything nature-based, we're really interested in this eco-futurism. So the next at least 10, 15 years, it's all about this eco-futurism. So anything to do with florals, with nature, with getting out into nature, with being in that space. So where we drink whiskey and eat, we're much more interested in the connection between outside and inside, and the kitchen becoming the apothecary of the house, so that nature really starts to play a real focal, a central piece in our lives. Because we're also interested in this survival. So I think whiskey is part of this whole picture of fermented foods, because of keeping things going longer. So a lot more about fermentation, again, more about mushrooms. And one of the big flavors that's going to come in 2021 is celery. So I don't know what's going to happen in whiskey and celery, but that's one of the big things that's coming through. So just to repeat that, we're looking for comfort, we're looking for nostalgia and belonging. It's about the clan. And I think that whiskey will start to play on that a little bit more, and really start to look at more of the historical connections and histories of the different clans that have made that whiskey, and really go back into ancient ritual, because we're looking at new rituals, because we're redefining our future, and we're realizing that we're throwing away all the stuff that hasn't worked. We're creating new rituals and pulling in some of the real old ritual practices of ancient times.
That's very interesting. So yes. What do you think in terms of the lockdown experience? People are drinking at home. They're maybe getting more creative, maybe mixing up, like Freddie's talking about, the rise of kind of coffee whiskey cocktails in China. So has that kind of been an impetus for people to be more innovative, to be more experimental, because they've got time and they're at home and they can try all kinds of different things?
It's about experience, and I think that people are going to start personalizing everything much more. I mean, one of the things that we're going to see at Christmas is people making their presents much more. So that kind of personalization of whiskey is about making it mine and making it special. Again, it's a little bit like that everyday, making the everyday special. So you've had this whiskey for a long time, but what makes it unique? And it's the way that you're personalizing it now. And I think that's the same in every single thing that we do in our lives as we go forward.
Okay, fascinating. And so mushrooms.
Mushrooms, a lot of mushroom.
I guess that would tie in, Andy, with our kind of deep, rich and dark fruits, you know, those kind of rancio notes, aged whiskies, that kind of thing.
I was thinking exactly that, Richard. And, you know, we've seen this real interest in cherry matured whiskies, and you see that rancio, mushroomy, earthy flavors in those cherry cask matured whiskey. So that really, that caught me. I think there's so much to talk about here. We could.
I'm just wondering if they're going to start creating different sorts of membranes from mushrooms, because they can create their own membrane. So there'd be a different filtration that you can do for alcohol through mushroom membranes, because they're creating like structures.
Yeah, wow, interesting. I mean, because whiskey may or may not be filtered. We don't use any filtration process for our whiskies. They're literally as they come out of the cask, which other than a little bit of, to make sure there's no bits of wood floating around in them. But, you know, traditionally we just use cellulose filter papers, and, you know, it works, but I guess that'd be interesting new technology to look at. I'm really fascinated by this whole myco protein mushroom thing you're talking about. In my past life, the lab I was working, we looked a lot at using plants as factories to make materials, you know, whether it be plastic, spider silk, adhesives. So this is fascinating to hear about how you think, you know, the kind of the mushroom, you know, mycology will go in that direction. Really interesting.
Yeah. And we're going to start seeing just being interested in this, almost this intelligent communication between plant life. And so that will be a big conversation, not just the trees and the roots of the trees, as we know they can have conversations, but the power we'll understand as we move into this place of knowing, and the human mind, which we don't know very well, we'll understand the communication between ourselves, silent communication, the power of the mind, and how we are actually, because we've always thought of ourselves up until now as nature and man. And what we're going to start seeing is the merging of that, and how we are very much integrated with that, and the power of our mind on the effect of plants and nature. And we'll see this almost a little bit like the computer network. We'll see that with the mushroom network, or the mold and fungus network through the planet, and how it's all communicating with itself. So it's
fascinating. I think
mind-blowing stuff.
This concept, I think it's allelopathy, I think is the term that was used for the way plants communicate and the way you're describing. I think it was kind of dismissed as being a little bit kind of crackpot science, but, you know, I always believe it would, you know, it'd come of age, and it sounds as though that's exactly what you say in this, you know, communication, whether it's through the rhizosphere or the roots. Utterly fascinating.
Morgan, can I just ask, because I'm interested in your perception, obviously, of whiskey as you called it, an ancient drink, a traditional drink, something that we've had for centuries, or, you know, for such a long time, and that gives us a sense of comfort. But obviously, it's a traditional and ancient drink. But from your point of view, it's got a very bright future, because it does bring us that comfort. And whatever kind of transition point we're at in 2020, with everything that's happened, things are not going to be the same, but we have whiskey to bring us that comfort and that sense of something that exists and endures. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, one of the things with trends, and I think people always misunderstand this, you know, as we look into the future, and I talked about flowers and plants and nature and ecofuturism, and people think, oh, well, that's like having an allotment. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that we are going into super high tech, way more than we can even understand now. So the things they coexist, and I think it's the same for whiskey. It's got an ancient past, and that's really interesting because you can tap into those nostalgia stories. But it's also very interesting in terms of how you can create comfort from that. But you can go forward and develop it, make it my whiskey. You can change up things to make it more textured. I think one of the things we're definitely going to see is more edibles in the alcohol space. So edible whiskies, ways in which we can eat that, whether it's in ice cream or different sorts of flavors that we can eat. I think we're going to see lots of possibilities in that. So it's both, and it can be both. I think that's one of the things with trends that we think it's either or, but it's actually concurrent.
Yeah, sorry, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've always been fascinated by the idea that, you know, ultimately Scotch whisky production is rooted in historical traditional practice, and it doesn't really vary a great deal. It can't. You know, the Scotch whisky regulations define that it must be made in this certain way, and it is pretty basic, traditional. But that doesn't mean there's that room for innovation there either, and room for that. Understanding of, say, where flavor comes from.
And combining that with loads of different foods and loads of different ways of, I don't think it just has to be limited. I mean, of course you're purists and you want to experience it in a glass and traditional way, but there's lots of other variations and possibilities, especially now when you are speaking to perhaps an audience that have never been available to you before, who might come to whiskey in a very different manner, you know, whether that's in edibles or whether that is in something like coffee, as was just mentioned, that it might come in very different routes. And I think that's one of the things we'll be seeing more of, the different deliverables and ways in which people can experience that.
Can I pick up on just one more point, Richard? Is there time for me to do it? So I was very interested in your ideas around, you know, personalization of the product, and I guess that can be everything from, you know, your name on the bottle, but and I just thought this is, you know, we're really good friends with the guys who've set up and are now running Holyrood Distillery, and they're obsessed with flavor just like we are. It's all about flavor. And, you know, they've gone now as far as you can actually go to them. You can sit down and discuss your recipe and production process. And they use their knowledge and understanding to create you know, almost bespoke flavor style spirit, which you can then mature in said cask to further enhance in the direction of the flavor you want. So that's, you know, absolutely personalization of the liquid in the bottle itself, which I just think, you know, super exciting and really, you know, kind of just fits with, you know, what we're all about at the society in terms of creating new flavor diversity, and just but fascinating that you see, you know, that personalization thing. It's kind of, there's an example of it happening, if you like, already.
Yeah, and I think it's even from a much more micro level with someone just in their house. And I think that's one of the things we're going to see, is that people almost want to be hands-on with the innovation, that it's just from their own bottle that they've done it. It doesn't have to have their name on the bottle. It can be just any old bottle of whiskey, and they're still innovating. One of the things that I think it's really important to think about when we're thinking about real personalization and innovation and flavor is that people are so influenced by everything else, not the taste of what they're having. So it's definitely the shape of the bottle, it's the color of the bottle, and it's the smell of things way beyond they even get to the drinking of the whiskey itself, and that perception is everything. And a great thing to look at in parallel with whiskey flavors is the way in which there was an experiment done about perfume and how to help women choose perfume. And rather than getting them to, you know, because a lot of women choose perfume because they like the bottle, actually nothing to do with the fact of the smell. In fact, the smell is the only thing in perfume sales that's not talked about. Nobody ever says, oh, it smells like roses. It's somebody, you know, wearing a negligee walking through a bedroom, and then you get the bottle and you like the bottle and you think, I'd like to be that woman. So you're never actually buying it on smell. And I think it's really key for whiskey. And one of the things that I've looked at in the past when working with whiskey brands is to not think about the flavor at all, which was terrible for you, I know, but actually to look at all of the other things around that, and to look at the certain personality type of the person buying it, and you test their preferences not by taste but by color. So you get them to pick color patterns, and based on that you can find their profile and their preferences really accurately, about 86% accuracy from them picking colors.
Wow.
Nothing to do with whiskey colors. So
super interesting.
So I think, like I said, it's about the mind, and it's about, you know, understanding the power of the mind rather than, you know, what you like in that flavor.
It would always maybe slightly amuse me that we spent all this time at the Research Institute understanding the link between chemical composition and flavor and the production process, and then of course human psychologist just gets in the way and throws it all in, you know, up in the air.
It happens all the time with food brands when they put them on the shelves. Everybody loves the taste in all the tests, and then it stays 6 months and it flops, and it's, you know, every other one. So it's a classic, really, and it's very difficult when you know so much about whiskey and you love it so much and you've tasted so many to think, how can this one not be so popular? It's just because for all of the other indicators that you kind of override because you know that you like the flavour.
Yeah. Morgan, we could talk for a lot longer, but unfortunately we're going to have to move on. But as always, fascinating to catch up with you. I hope it's not another 3 years before we catch up again and we can see where your predictions have come true and how you've developed since then. But
I'm just going to add one last thing. Water as well. We're going to be there's a lot going on in the water space.
Yeah.
We've got to put that in, but I just wanted to mention it because there's a heck of a lot new development in water. It's where the big money is. So
we need to meet at the vaults then, Morgan, to discuss.
Okay, well, I'm sure you can be put in touch.
Morgan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
See you, and we'll catch up soon, I hope.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. See you.
Oh, wow. How about that? So that's a peek into the future for you, Andy. That's quite a lot to take on board.
My mind's...
Yeah. It's a lot to absorb. Right. All good stuff. Now, let's move on with our pub quiz. So we like to kind of theme things around the outturn. So we've used some bottles as kind of inspiration for some questions. We've got some whiskey knowledge in there. So it's not just whiskey. It's a kind of general test, general knowledge. It's not university challenge or anything, but it's good stuff. So if you want to take part, it's going to be just a multiple choice, A, B, C, or D for each one of our 10 questions. You can put your choice into our comments as we go along and see what you think. Maybe some easier ones and some harder ones, but let's give it a shot. Right, we're ready to go. Right, Andy, are you ready to take it away?
Am I doing number one?
Yeah, why not? Go.
Okay, right. I don't know how to pronounce some of these words.
Come on.
Cask number 5.72, Scaramanga, references the James Bond villain Francisco Scaramanga. What film did he appear in? Is it A, The Man with the Golden Gun, B, Goldfinger, C, From Russia with Love, or D, Dr. No?
Right, so Scaramanga was in today's outturn, a beautiful 30-year-old bottling, I think it is, from distillery number 5, just sensational. So The Man with the Golden Gun, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, or Dr. No. Well, we've got A's, C's. A seems to be the consensus so far. So the answer is, for the Bond fans out there, A, The Man with the Golden Gun. Any fun facts about James Bond? Is that your thing, Andy?
I'm totally out of my depth, Richard. I can tell
you who played Scaramanga.
I have no idea.
The one and only Christopher Lee.
No, I didn't know that.
He also starred in my favourite film of all time, The Wicker Man. Just the best film ever.
That is an awesome film.
It's an awesome film. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Question 2, cask 5.72. It was distilled the year after British computer scientist Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. What year did he invent the World Wide Web? Was it A, 1985, B, 1988, C, 1989, or D, 1991? Did you know this one, Andy?
I think I do know the answer to this one, Richard.
Right, I would expect you to know that kind of thing. So let's see. Anyone taking part? We get a couple of. We get D's.
I'm going to scroll the. I don't see any. Oh, we've got a mix. We've got a mix of C's and B's. So
C's or B's, 88 or 89. Well,
well, now we've got some A's and D's as well. So.
Right.
You know what? Yeah. Can I have a guess?
The answer is 1989.
Yeah.
And the fun fact here is apparently when Sir Tim Berners-Lee proposed this idea, I think he was working at CERN at the time, and he proposed this idea of this this way to connect people on this kind of internet worldwide thing. And his boss said it was like, interesting, but there's not much to see there. So I think we can probably all take inspiration from like having great ideas, which we're told, nah, I don't think that's going to work out. So it did work out, and that's why we're here this evening on the World Wide Web. So thank you, Sir Tim. Right, over to you.
Oh, good whiskey question. What is the volume of a typical French wine barrique? And I'm guessing this is in there, Richard, because our Smoky Harbour fish supper has been matured in a second fill, heavily toasted French wine barrique. So options are multiple guess: A, 125 litres, B, 225 litres, C, 500 litres, and D, 700 litres. So, do you know this, Richard?
You know what? I think I would have got this wrong. I think. Yeah. I think I would have. When I hear barrique, I probably think of. I think more in terms of like the size of the casks that come from Spain, which are 500 litres, right? Yeah, I think of barriques on a par with butts. So I think I would have got this wrong. I would have said C, and the answer is.
We've got a mix of B's and C's mostly on the chat there, Richard. B's 225.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd have done it more by a process of elimination, because 700 is the maximum size cask you can use to mature Scotch whisky as per the regs. That would be a port pipe, for example. 500, like you say, is a butt, typical for the sherry industry, and 125 just sounded a wee bit small to me.
Yeah. As always, these things, you check different sources and they'll give you different information. So it's always a bit of a grey area around these sizes, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a cask after all, so it'll do exactly what it likes.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Good. No, that's a good one. Good one.
All right, question 4. We've got a new release in our single malt series. So it's not single cask, it's a single malt that we've developed. It's called Black Oak, and that came out today as well. It comes from Armagnac barrels made from Gascon Black Oak. In what part of France is Gascony? Is it in A, the northeast, B, the northwest, C, central France, or D, the southwest? So Gascon Black Oak.
I'm super excited about a bottle of this finding its way into the house, by the way, Richard.
Have you had a chance to try it yet?
I may have had a secret little sample with Ewan, as our spirits manager, when he was first putting this together, and it was it was phenomenal.
Yeah. Are you getting the Armagnac influence in that drink?
The thing for me, the thing I remember most was just this incredibly rich sweetness.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, look, it's a while ago. It seems like an eternity ago, of course. What's the answer, Richard?
Let's give people the answer. The answer is the Southwest, which is obviously home to the Cognac region. It's home to Armagnac. It's home to Bordeaux wine. So a big part of the drinks industry based down in Gascony in the Southwest. Beautiful part of the world. If you haven't been to that part of the world, oh my goodness, what a treat to eat and drink in Gascony is absolutely sensational. Right, don't get me started. Is this your turn, Andy? You take this one.
Why do you give me the ones where it's difficult to pronounce?
Well,
Cask number 53.339.
I'll keep you right.
Hebridean ceviche. Yeah?
Ceviche.
Ceviche. See, you should have done it.
Where does in Italian? It's okay. I won't say anymore.
Where does ceviche come from? So Argentina, Peru, España, and did you hear Trump pronounce this the other day?
Thailand.
Thailand. Thailand.
Does ceviche come from Thailand?
Yeah, Thailand.
Yeah, I don't know. You know ceviche? Have you tried ceviche? No?
No.
Again, one of life's great pleasures, ceviche. I've never tried Hebridean ceviche.
Okay.
But
are you going to tell us where it's from then?
I would like to try Hebridean ceviche if it's coming out of a bottle from Distillery 53.
Right.
Yes. Let me see. Who have we got? Jimmy Jazz is saying B, Peru. Pete Heads B. Lee J. Brown is Argentina. Okay, they're in South America, so they're in the right part of the world. The answer is Peru, and I can totally recommend ceviche. Not just for the, you know what it is? It's like seafood cured in lime. So it's like raw seafood cured in lime, and you get this wonderful juice that comes from the lime juice and the fish juice, and it kind of pickles the fish. So you eat it raw, but it's cured in this lime juice, and it leaves you with this liquid, and it's called leche de tigre, which is tiger's milk. And supposedly, if you eat your ceviche and then you drink your leche de tigre, it gives you, well, it's an aphrodisiac. Let's put it that way. It's good for your energy levels. Shall we just leave it at that? Also meant for a hangover, but
I was just listening to the description of those flavors. I did something I wouldn't normally do, and I checked which distillery this is, and we see quite a few of these come through the panel, and very definitely that sort of limey, citrusy, kind of maritime seafood-like flavors is integral to these whiskies.
Yeah, and it might even have aphrodisiac qualities as well. So who knows?
Depends how much, I guess.
I think we'd better move on.
Right, your turn.
Yeah, cask number 72.90 is called umami salami. So what is umami? Is it A, a kind of sea creature, B, an artificial food flavoring? Is it C, a Japanese broth? Or is it D, the fifth taste after salty, sweet, sour, and bitter? Right,
you know what?
Salami.
You know what, Richard? With these multiple guests, as I always call them, there's usually things that are, it obviously isn't. but every single thing here is credible. It sounds like a sea creature. It sounds like artificial food flavoring. It sounds like Japanese broth, and it could be that the fifth taste as well.
Well, I quite like Aquavita's answer. It's an exclamation after a stubbed toe. Oh, mommy! Very good. Well, we've got most people going for D. But we've got some going for C, a Japanese broth. So, so umami is the fifth taste after salty, sweet, sour, and bitter. And it's something that we do see cropping up in our tasting notes. I think in this term, umami is referenced in 6836, Gite Me My Cardigan, that bottle. And it's also referenced in 26.147, the Healing Coup d'etat. So umami does pop up. Anything you can tell us about umami, Andy?
That it's I guess the best way to describe it is kind of savory, kind of fungal almost. Some of those flavors that Morgan was talking about earlier, which sort of predicting they're going to become very much in vogue. So it's an interesting one. I think it was debated for a long time as to whether it really existed, was there this fifth taste, but my understanding now is it's most flavor scientists would agree it does actually exist.
Yeah.
But,
and it's in MSG, isn't it? Which which is added to, obviously Chinese food was for adding MSG, and it does give a quality which adds a flavor which makes stuff very Moorish. That term, but it does add something, and that's umami right there, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I was going to mention that as well. It does that thing that salt does, which is just enhance flavor. So, and perhaps even more so, incredibly Moorish. So, interesting.
Okay, moving on. Your turn.
Yeah, okay. It's National Rum Day on the 16th of August, and we're celebrating with a release, R 2.10 or 2.10. It's called Explore, Experience, Enjoy. It comes from Guyana, which was previously a colony of which country? So we've got France, the Netherlands, Spain, and the United Kingdom.
Right. Okay.
Jimmy
is in the Netherlands. Kai is asking, isn't umami in Parmesan?
Yeah, I saw that.
Absolutely right, Kai. Yes, it is what, tonight I had meatballs on spaghetti and I shaved that Parmesan over the top, and you just can't imagine eating bolognese sauce or meatballs without the Parmesan, and that's the umami, which just adds that extra layer of flavor to it. So yes, integral to Parmesan. Anyway.
It was a flavour as well I was thinking about when we were talking about the Worcestershire sauce earlier, from the tasting of the Smoky Harbour fish supper. That's almost umami-like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, back to rum. I'm going to guess it's, France. We've got a mix of answers.
You would be in good company because most of our contributors are saying A for France. Stephen Fisher, A. Jimmy Jazz is A. Pete Head, A or D. He's hedging his bet. Yeah, maybe quite a tricky one. The answer is the United Kingdom. And Guyana is up in that northeast part of South America, part of the continent, where it's next door to Suriname, which was a Dutch colony until 1975, and they speak Dutch in Suriname. They speak English in Guyana because it was a British colony, and it became a republic in 1970. And next door to Suriname is French Guyana, which is still an overseas département of France and a region of France. So there.
So that addresses Pete Head's comment here. I think French Guyana is still called French Guyana. That's why I said France. So there you go.
Interesting little part of South America where there's not the Spanish influence. There's French, Dutch, and British, and they don't speak Spanish as their as their national languages. So there. Right, Andy, you have to do this one.
Okay, yes, this sounds like my kind of question. So TCP. So for those that that maybe aren't British listening, it's antiseptic-y cleaning type thing. Is often referenced in the tasting notes of Islay whiskies. For example, cask number 53.339, Hebridean Ceviche. What does TCP stand for? Trusted cleaning product, total care partner, are you ready?
Yeah.
Trichlorophenol methylodisalicyle.
I thought if anyone could say it, Andy, it was going to be you.
Trichlorophenol methylodisalicyle.
That's a very good effort.
I do that Welsh place name if you want instead.
Yeah, there was no way I was reading this question out. And D.
Triple concentrated phenols.
Right.
So, what does TCP stand for, folks? When you showed me this question, Richard, I immediately thought of the old WD-40 question.
Right. What's that?
Oh, what's the name? It's the 40th formula or something.
Okay.
It often crops up in pub quizzes anyway. So
I think everyone's going for C. Multi-mission says because it would be cruel if that wasn't the correct answer.
Well, there is an element of that, and yeah, intuitively one feels it should be the chemical name for it, but
well, the correct you're going to have to tell us the correct answer, Andy. It is
C. Trichlorophenomethylidosalicyle.
Oh, very well done. Very well done. Okay.
TCP.
I'm happy to do question 9 because it doesn't have anything too difficult to pronounce. Cask number 135.23 is described as having Drambuie notes. Which historical figure does legend say invented the recipe for Drambuie? A. James Graham, the Marquis of Montrose. B. Bonnie Prince Charlie. C. Johnny Walker. Or D. Andrew Usher. Right? I think the question kind of leads you to the answer in this one.
Yeah, I think I knew.
Because if it was Johnny Walker or Andrew Usher, clearly you would have some kind of proper historical evidence that they invented the recipe. But when you're talking about legend, it kind of pushes you to the.
What have we got? We've got all B's.
Yeah, all B's, all correct. Bonnie Prince Charlie. Apparently, he fled from the disaster that was Culloden in 1746, and he was given shelter in Skye by the McKinnon clan. And as thanks to them, he passed on his recipe for Drambuie. That's the story. Whether there's one iota of truth in that, I do not know, but that's what they say. So,
as we always say, Richard, don't let the truth get in the way.
You're talking to a journalist here. So
yes, true. Andrew Usher, of course, is the I guess the inventor of blended whiskey. Johnny Walker, some blended whiskey.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, sells a few bottles.
On you go.
Right. Okay. Oh, right. Like this. We're familiar with the whiskey regions of Highland, Speyside, Campbelltown, Lowland, and Islay. When did they become legal geographical indicators? 1909, 1918, 1974, good year, 2009. So I guess for a long time we used these descriptors to navigate flavour, didn't we, really, Richard? We sort of grouped whiskies into where they came from and broadly decided that whiskies from the same area tasted similar, which is kind of true, but we know there's lots of exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
Non-peated whiskies from Islay, peated whiskies from Speyside. I forget our distillery code for them, but
66.
Sorry?
66.
Yes, good example. Yeah. So when did the whiskey regions that we're all familiar with, when did they become legal geographical indicators? So I think this is in UK and, well, give away EU law.
Yeah.
So when is it? And the answer is perhaps, well, let's have a look. We've got...
I've already revealed it.
Oh, you have? Sorry, right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think mostly it was D. So, yeah, I thought there'd be a little bit of a, maybe uncertainty around that one, Richard, because it feels kind of late, feel like we've had that forever in our lexicon, the way we talk about whiskey. But, and I think you've got a few more interesting little snippets about the nature of these.
Well, there was some legislation from the early 20th century which did talk about regions, but it was very vague, and it didn't really put anything down properly in black and white. And it wasn't actually until 2009 that the Scotch Whisky Association did introduce this legislation, which classified Highlands, Lowland, and Speyside as protected regions. Mm-hmm. Campbelltown and Islay are protected localities. Now, don't ask me what the difference between a region and a locality is, but it was as late as 2009 that there was that kind of proper legal protection for those regions. But as you say, it might be an interesting indicator, but ultimately it doesn't really tell you what's going to be in the glass. But anyway,
it doesn't. I mean, it was always a steer, but I think where we've gone with having flavour profiles is probably much more. I mean, you need to know this language. You need to be able to translate what we mean by Speyside, whereas our flavour profiles tell you exactly what we mean by the descriptor. It's sweet and spicy. What does Speyside mean? So anyway. Don't get me started.
So how did y'all do with the quiz? Anyone with a 10 out of 10? That might be a big ask for 10 out of 10. But yeah, okay, let's move on. Enough of that chat. We're very happy to be joined this evening by Roy Duff, whiskey evangelist from Aqua Vitae. And first of all, I'm very thankful to Roy, because when we started doing our pub sessions, I reached out to Roy to ask him, Roy, how do you do these things? What kind of platform are you working with? And Roy was very generous with his time and with his knowledge, and helped me to kind of get set up. And that was like in late April, early May, when we started doing the festival pub sessions. And we've done a lot since then. So Roy, thank you for that. The reason we asked you on tonight is our theme is kind of looking to the future and how we're kind of living with a new online world. But you were an early adopter of the technology. You kind of grasped the potential of bringing a community together online, and you're taking it forward as well. So tell us initially really about how you kind of had the idea to get into an online world where you were kind of ahead of the curve. There was no pandemic when you were doing this. There was no impetus to be doing it, but you had a vision for it. So where did that come from?
There's no such thing as an original idea, Richard, I have to say. It's really nice to be here. Thanks very much for the nice welcome. And you're very welcome. Whiskey demands it, that we all kind of help each other a wee bit, right? But I have to be honest that before I was creating any content or enjoying YouTube in terms of output, I was very much part of the community, and I was watching a lot of it. One of my favourite channels was the Scotch Test Dummies guys out in Kansas in the US. And they're just kind of two really fun guys that were sharing their attitude towards whiskey and things. And I was a fan of their show. And then they started to do the live streams as well. And when I realized that they were not only connecting community and audience and creator, but they were connecting channels together, that's when, you know, the nail was hammered home. I'd been flirting with the idea of creating video and putting out a video content. And when I saw that demonstrated by those guys, I knew that that was the kind of community I wanted to be part of. I'd already put out a couple of videos and things. I hadn't done any live streams, but back in 2017, inspired by what the Scottish Test Dummies had started, I decided it might be a good idea to put out a live stream in the European time zone. There was nobody here doing it regularly in a regular slot at that time, apart from Whisky Jason over in Germany was doing one in German. And that was what kind of drove me to do it. And I just went live unannounced one Thursday evening at 9:45, 9:45. That's still the time it is now. And 39 people just joined out of the blue, and we had a really nice time, a bit like tonight. It feels like I'm hanging out with friends tonight. Of course I am. And that's where it all started from back in 2017, just that idea of having that sense of connectedness, that sense of community that's completely agnostic to where you are in the world and what you're all about, what you're doing, just that ability to kind of come together for a bit of scheduled whiskey time. And it's been fantastic ever since. It's really a privilege. I keep saying that, but it truly is.
How have you developed, Roy, through the past few months? It's hard to believe it was like really middle of March, wasn't it, that we went into lockdown? So you already had this established online existence. How have you seen it develop since like middle of March?
I have to say that, you know, the conversation that you and I had, that time that we took to kind of find our way around differentiating between video conferencing and broadcasting and doing all that kind of thing to help you get started, I'd have done quite well if I was running a consultancy back then, because when lockdown kicked in, everybody needed to take this kind of suddenly paused workforce, this built up energy that had been kind of going around festivals and tastings or whatever events that was going on, distillery tours and things. And then they had to find a way to take that online. So going from really an industry that only kind of touched on video content, certainly they weren't doing it. It tended to be quite high-end professional stuff. So to step into the kind of ad hoc YouTube arena, let's say, was quite a step for them. But it took something like, I think, the pandemic kicking off earlier in the year for a lot of them to kind of relax a little bit and realize that it can be really valuable to a community. It can be good fun if it's approached with the right attitude, and if it's approached with the understanding of creating something for the audience rather than creating something simply that supports your brand. I think that it's a leap for some people to make that transition, but once they realize that when they're making video content, it has to be content that's made for an audience, then it has value. And once collaboration comes into it again, I think it's really valuable for the community as well. So we've seen a huge explosion in springtime when the pandemic and the lockdown kicked in, but as things have eased off there, what's happened is the regularity, let's say the volume of content that was going out has eased off a wee bit. And I think that had to happen. It had to happen in that way. But obviously content such as the stuff that you're putting out, Richard, the SMWS, it looks like it might stay. It might become a longer term thing. And I think that's good as long as there's a focus on, like I say, the audience and quality over quantity. Because at the end of the day, with these, especially with live streaming, we're competing for viewer minutes. So we have to kind of try and focus as much as we can. We can keep it relaxed and laid back and even amateurish maybe, but keep it fun, keep it.
Yeah. I think that's definitely part of the appeal. That it's not a professional broadcast, as anyone can tell, but it is an excuse to get together. But it's, you know, we're coming through the pandemic. People are going back out to bars. They are seeing people again, obviously with some restrictions in place. Our members' rooms are opening up, and you know, people are gradually transitioning back to some kind of real life interaction. So where do you see this going? You're an early adopter, but then you come through the pandemic, and now we're moving through to a new phase. So where do you see it going from here, Roy?
I think what's going to happen going forward, or where I would, let's say where I would like to see it going, is I would like to see, you know, the shackles have come off a wee bit. So a lot of producers, it was really difficult to kind of, you had to sell a concept to them in order for them to feel comfortable about appearing on a show as a guest, let's say. So the industry was a wee bit nervous about it, because most of the guys that create and do what I do are kind of maverick enthusiasts, hobbyists, let's say, whiskey hobbyists that have chosen to kind of step into a virtual realm to share their whiskey, and that was quite dangerous for them a wee bit. So I think the lockdown forced them to kind of look at it as an opportunity. So I think I would like to see more of that, a more relaxed, laid-back attitude from the industry in the future, that they're more comfortable to step into that, and it doesn't have to be high-end video production all the time. It's not an advert that you're making. You're not making ads. You're making valuable content, and there is a difference there. I would like to see more of that, but I would also like to see, because we are competing for viewer minutes, I would like to see more collaboration. I would like to see these events having people coming together much in the same way they would at a festival or a shared event, anything like that. If you consider walking into duty free or walking into a specialist retailer or wherever you buy your whiskey, they're all kind of sitting next to each other. So to kind of isolate yourself and pretend that you're the only person that makes, sells bottles or otherwise works in whiskey, to pretend that you're the only one is a wee bit naive. And I think that, you know, that concept of, you know, the rising tide lifting all boats and things, I think if that's the focus going forward, I think it's a good mutual space for us all to be in.
Well, I mean, I think we're coming at this from the same point of view. Really, your mantra is, it's not whiskey until it's shared. And in society, we always say better when shared. You know, it might sound like a cliche, but it's a truth. And whether we're together in the same space or whether we're online, it is better when shared, and that's kind of fundamental to it. And so,
nobody's going to starve us of our wee quiet moments, sitting in our favourite chair, whatever we're doing, and just having that kind of one-on-one with a dram and just enjoying it or dissecting it, analyze whatever we want to do. But we all know how powerful whiskey is at getting people together and connecting people and making us forget all the things that divides us, and we focus on this wonderful thing that can unite. And I think that if we have the technology available to us now, you talk about the ability to go to these bars that are starting to open up again and things. That's wonderful for people like me who live in a big city, let's say. Maybe I have some SMWS venues near me or whatever. But for so many folk out there that enjoy this content, it's completely indifferent. It's agnostic to where they live. And it can also wrap around their time frame. You know, they don't need to be at a certain point. Okay, it's nice to catch it live, but if they want to catch it in chunks on the catch up or something, they can do that as well. It can wrap around their life and it can come to them wherever they're located. And I think that's a nice advantage.
Absolutely.
Right, Richard, can I just pick up on that, this sort of the collaboration bit there? And because I think what I've seen recently is, you know, that there is that willingness within the industry to take a collaborative approach to this. And I know it's a little bit different. Just as an example, throughout lockdown, I've been delivering sort of training and education, whiskey education sessions, you know, through video link for our diaspora of ambassadors who go out and talk about the society's whiskies all over the world with our members. And what was a really, maybe it wasn't a surprise, but what was, you know, really great was rather, I felt, you know, they don't just want to hear from me. It'd be good to get some other well-known people in the industry to talk about what they do and their view of the industry. And I called a few friends, and very quickly we had a whole load of guest speaker slots, and, you know, people including Richard Patterson, you know, master blender of White Mackay, Alistair Day, who set up Brassey Distillery, Jack Mayer, head distiller at Holyrood, and so on. And every single phone call, it was just, yeah, straight away, definitely. I'd love to get on and talk to your team. So I think that, you know, that desire and willingness is there in the industry, particularly within the group of people who are involved in making the whiskey, to just collaborate and do this.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's a huge drive there to kind of try and replicate the thing that actually lies behind the scenes in whiskey a lot of the time. You know, when we're talking about the production of whiskey and the whole concept in Scotch, if we take Scotch as an example, cask trading and things like that, you know, the industry has been very cooperative and very collaborative traditionally. Yeah. It's only really when a label or a branding or something or a positioning is placed around a product that kind of that competitiveness is forced forward. But in the real world, as enthusiasts, we quickly move past that kind of label thing, and we're willing to explore all the whiskies we can get our hands on. That's kind of reasonable value, the whiskies that we can get and enjoy, and we become very indifferent, and we want to explore as many distilleries as possible. And we don't buy a bottle and finish it and throw it away and finish it and throw it away. We're, as you can see behind me, we're buying multiple bottles in order to enjoy them in contrast with each other. So that's that side of the market towards the enthusiast is, I think, less brand dependent and more about quality of engagement.
Totally agree. I mean, it's what makes this industry such a pleasure to work in. Richard, I'm sure you'd say exactly the same. And you know, I often relate stories that kind of bring this to life, and I think it's captured nowhere better than the island where this comes from, and you know, the camaraderie and shared collective endeavour on Islay.
Okay.
Sorry.
I couldn't see which bottle it was, but yeah, you're back on Islay with the distillery.
Yeah, so back on Islay with the number 10. So. Well, it's Bunnahabhain. I did it.
I mean, you can see it everywhere. Though you see it in Campbelltown, you see it on Scapa. Sorry, not Scapa. On Scapa actually. With Highland Park and Scapa working together to keep both distilleries going. It happened at Glen Scotia and Springbank as well. Right, and I guess anywhere where there's an element of remoteness. So if something goes down, if something is required, you know.
You do.
I think it's our duty as enthusiasts actually to embrace and kind of try and encourage that to continue.
Right, it's a good note to end on. So, cheers for joining us. Great to see you in the virtual pub tonight. And again, thank you for helping us out when we were getting set up. So, great to get your input. And to look to the future of this as well. So yeah, absolutely, we're going to be doing more of this even when we transition back to real life. There's absolutely a demand for it. We've got members all over the country and all over the world who are able to tune in and share in this. So lots of good things to come out of it. Oh, Andy wants to say something.
Before Roy goes, Kai has put a message here saying, "Oh, you'll all be having a virtual hug soon." Lovely. So let's have a virtual hug.
That's taking it too far. A virtual elbow bump. Right, Roy. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
In good spirit.
Good luck. Right. Okay, Andy. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to go back for a second little set from DJ Dolphin Boy. Okay. Yeah. So for anyone that didn't get their dancing shoes on first time around, we are going to just go out with a bit of this music from Dolphin Boy. Again, thank you to Mads for the video, but Dolphin Boy, take it away. Okay, nice way to end with a second set from Dolphin Boy. Again, he apologises that he couldn't play live for us, but hopefully we'll get back to the Isle of Egg once he is sorted out with his technology. But at least we got some banging tunes from Dolphin Boy, also known as Andy Levy. So thank you very much to him for his contribution. So a good night all round. Lots coming up, and I think, Andy, you've got a virtual tasting next week you want to tell us about?
I have. So I've got the pack of samples here ready to go. So hopefully some of you have already ordered one of those. If you haven't yet, get one. Should be an interesting evening. We're going to continue with the sort of the geek sci-fi theme, but we're going to take. We've got a guest in the form of Michael from Loch Lomond Distillery, and we're going to be having a John McShane, myself, Michael are going to be having a bit of a roundtable chat, taking, I suppose, a deep dive into where does flavour come from. Loch Lomond Distillery is fascinating in that there's over a dozen different distillation setups, and every single one of them produces a different style of spirit, and that's a really, I think, what we're going to look at that by tasting a few different drams from the distillery. There's a couple of lovely Spacesides in there as well. So that's next Thursday.
Okay, good stuff. Look out for that. There's real live tastings going on now at our society members rooms, which are gradually opening up. So get in touch with them for whatever you need to know about access and how they're managing things under the current circumstances. Partner bars opening up, so things are moving back to some form of real life. We're gearing up for our gathering next month, which is going to be, we're going to have some real life stuff and we're going to have a lot of virtual stuff, so a bit of both. Lots of special events. Big shout out to Dolphin Boy tonight, to Freddie from China for his contribution, to Dr. Morgan Gay, to Roy Duff, to Mads for helping us out with the video and the tunes, to Dr. Andy Forrester. I hope as members you got this week, right? And we've got big news about Unfiltered. On Monday, you're going to see Unfiltered in a new format, which I'm very excited about, and I hope you are too. Remember, ask Andy any whiskey questions. Ask Dr. Andy at smws.com. But in the meantime, I think that is us for tonight. So we'll say good health, Slange, and
good spirit.
Cheers, everyone.
Yeah.